Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to this August 19, 2014 edition of Nightcast. Israel's military says it has carried out airstrikes in the Gaza Strip in response to fresh rocket fire hours before a ceasefire was set to expire.
The first rockets flew without warning from Gaza 8 hours before the latest ceasefire was due to expire. Hopes for a more durable deal began to evaporate. Within minutes, Israel had begun to respond with air raids against targets in Gaza. It has warned repeatedly it won't negotiate while it's under fire, and it was quick to lay the blame for this sudden deterioration with Hamas.
Today's rocket attack on the Israeli city of Beersheba is a grave and direct violation of the ceasefire that Hamas committed to. This is the 11th ceasefire that Hamas has either rejected or violated.
Among the first to die in this renewed fighting in Gaza was a 5-year-old child, say the Palestinian authorities. And as Israel blamed Hamas for the resumption of hostilities, so Hamas, in its turn, blamed Israel.
The continuation of the Israeli airstrikes on the Gaza Strip is an attempt to abort the efforts of the Cairo negotiations. We put the responsibility on Israel for this escalation and the implications of it.
Israel has maintained powerful ground forces around its border with Gaza, their presence designed as a signal that the Israeli government is ready to intensify its military campaign if the rocket fire from Gaza intensifies. So the 8th day of a ceasefire that had never seemed likely to end with a breakthrough ended instead in breakdown. The prospects for talks now, never bright, have faded sharply. Kevin Connolly, BBC News, Jerusalem.
Friends, in that report you heard a Palestinian give their side of the breaking down of the ceasefire. The BBC's Yolande Nell in Gaza and Kevin Connolly in Jerusalem have more details in this report.
Well, about 8 hours before the expiry of the latest ceasefire agreement, we heard that there had been 3 rockets fired from Gaza towards the southern city of Beersheba in Israel. Those landed in open areas with no reports of any injuries. Soon afterwards, there was the order that came through from the Israeli Prime Minister's office and from the Ministry of Defense for the IDF to respond to that, and we heard several airstrikes taking place here in the Gaza Strip. Then, in just the last hour, another 2 rockets, we understand, fired towards southern Israel, those intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system. And we have seen a number of Israeli airstrikes. We've seen Israeli jets overhead, and just behind me, actually, in the eastern area of Shuja'iyah, which was flattened during Israel's ground offensive in large part. There have been fresh airstrikes there. Also, just a little bit to the south of there, in the area of Zaytun, we've seen these large plumes of smoke rising up once again.
Israel had always said it wouldn't negotiate under rocket fire. I think it would be politically very difficult for Benjamin Netanyahu, who's under political pressure at home on this issue, to try to carry on the Cairo peace talks after there had been this attack from Gaza. He'd also be under political pressure at home to show that Israel was ready with a very strong security response to any challenge. So, very quickly, I would say, the ceasefire and the political process built around it have begun to unravel. Now, whether there's something there to salvage was something that we'll see in the coming hours and days, but certainly for the moment, it's a very serious reverse for that political process, and Israel's withdrawal of its delegation from Cairo really means, I think, that meaningful talks on, say, a further ceasefire extension, which would have been something that Egypt would have been hoping to achieve today, that now looks like it's very unlikely, I think.
And friends, we've got more video from Israel. I want you to see this next one, where the head of the Palestinian delegation, Azem Ahmad, or Al-Mad, accused the Israelis of trying to force their position. And I want you to hear what he says. We'll talk about that after the video.
Up until this moment, there is no progress, and the situation is getting more complicated. We have presented the Palestinian delegation's final position to our Egyptian brothers approximately 2 hours ago. Up until this moment, we are waiting for the final answer regarding the final position that we have presented. The Israeli delegation, and maybe you, have followed the statements of the Israeli Prime Minister. They are now trying to force what they want. This is impossible to accept as Palestinians.
Well, of course it's impossible for the Palestinians to accept, negotiate, giving, to agree to give up their weapons. How else can they destroy Israel? Their real goal from their heart is the destruction of Israel, the annihilation of all the Jews. As I mentioned the other night, the Germans weren't able to do it. Well, we Palestinians will have to, or the Germans failed to do it, and the Palestinians will have to take over, create a new Holocaust, and which they've essentially begun. But more video yet here, friends. Israel's military says it has carried out airstrikes in the Gaza Strip in response to fresh rocket fire hours before a ceasefire was set to expire. And of course, let me just give you the numbers. 2,016 Palestinians and 66 Israelis have died since Operation Protective Edge began on July 8. Israeli government spokesman Mark Regev accused Hamas of a grave violation of the ceasefire, and you'll hear him add that any such truce had to be a two-way street.
Today's rocket attack on the Israeli city of Beersheba is a grave and direct violation of the ceasefire that Hamas committed to. This is the 11th ceasefire that Hamas has either rejected or violated. And it's clear that a ceasefire has to be a two-way street. It's not just that Israel hold its fire, Hamas must hold its fire too.
All right, that's Mark Regev. Right on point he made there. It can't be a one-way deal. Well, Israel, you got to hold your fire. We're going to keep shooting. A ceasefire is going on. You guys in Israel have to hold your fire while we shoot rockets at you because the ceasefire is in existence. I mean, the logic that just escapes you sometimes coming from the Palestinian side. Or at least, let me rephrase it, from the Hamas side, the descendants of Ishmael. The hatred, the animosity in the blood. Let's turn to some news, friends, related to the fourth seal of Revelation, which is depicted in Revelation as a pale horse with a rider whose name is Death. And Jesus Christ described the activities of this horse in three, and its rider. Christ described the activities of this horse and its rider, alongside whom Hades, hell, the grave writes. Christ described the activities in three different terms. One was loimus, meaning disease epidemics, pestilence, the plagues of Egypt. Another term he used was terak, meaning troubled waters, both literally and figuratively in the sense of mobs and seditions. We'll have a story related to mobs and seditions, actually a couple of stories yet to go tonight on mobs and seditions out of two different countries, including one right in the United States. Amazingly, some of the things happening in Missouri beginning to look like the Ukraine almost. But the third thing that Jesus Christ described that would happen between the third seal and the fifth seal of Revelation, that only leaves the fourth seal to peg it on, friends. And Christ said there would be seismus, which your Greek English lexicons define as seismus as a seismic activity, commotions in the air such as gale force winds of all kinds, and commotions on the ground such as earthquakes is the example given, but also that would include volcanic eruptions, tsunamis, wildfires, etc. And there is wildfire burning still in California. 13,000 evacuated from their homes. There is a volcano eruption that is in the news today. The risk of an eruption of Iceland's Bardarbunga volcano has increased after a series of earthquakes in the region. The risk level to the aviation industry has been raised, as you'll hear in this report, to orange. She'll explain what level that is. The eruption of Iceland's Eyjafjallajökull volcano in 2010 shut down much of Europe's airspace for 6 days, affecting more than 10 million people. With the report on today's volcano, here is Sophie Hutchison.
Scientists from Iceland's Met Office at the Bardarbunga volcano in the huge Vatna glacier. The volcano's risk of eruption's been raised to orange, the second highest level. Deep underground, the earth is moving. Over the past few days, a sharp increase in volcanic activity has been recorded, described as an intense earthquake swarm.
There is no clear evidence for magma moving upwards at the moment. It is still at a depth of 5 to 10 kilometers. However, in the course of these events, we cannot exclude that an eruption might take place in the near future.
This is the reason for concern. Back in 2010, the volcano Eyjafjallajökull exploded, producing a vast ash cloud. It shut down European airspace for 6 days, grounding flights and affecting an estimated 10 million travellers. It's thought that won't happen again. The evidence from the current volcano is that the molten magma is moving underground in 2 directions away from its centre. And with the holiday season at its peak, so far that's good news for travellers. Sophie Hutchinson, BBC News.
All right, and friends, the next report I have is, I don't have video. I'm just going to have to read it to you, but it could be kind of, just hearing about this could be a little bit shocking. News reporter James Foley has been missing since he was seized in Syria in 2012. The Islamic State militant group has, now I don't have the picture, and even if I did have it, friends, I'm not so sure I'd want to show it to you. The Islamic State militant group has released a video online purporting to show the beheading of this U.S. journalist. The victim was identified by the militants as James Foley, a freelancer who was seized in Syria, as I said, in late 2012. The militants said it was in revenge for recent U.S. airstrikes against the Islamic State group in Iraq and Iraq. The video has not been independently verified, but the White House said if it was genuine, the U.S. would be appalled by the brutal murder. Foley's family wrote on Facebook, "We know that many of you are looking for confirmation or answers. Please be patient until we all have more information, and keep the Foleys in your thoughts and prayers." That's what the family wrote on Facebook. Foley has reported extensively across the Middle East, working for America's Global Post and other media outlets, including the French news agency AFP. If the video is genuine, we are appalled by the brutal murder of an innocent American journalist, so says Caitlin Hayden, U.S. Secretary, U.S. Security spokeswoman.